Recording. Go ahead, the show is yours, Ivo. I can see your screen in full screen mode.
Thanks a lot, Saskia. Just I'm trying to see how I can see that everybody. Okay, I got it. It's all fine. Yeah, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here to this event, as always. But I have to admit, it's moving very fast, so it's hard for me to catch up with it. For example, 2 years back, I had a workshop on essential balances, which had nothing to do with the topic that year, which was digital disruption. And today, 2 years later, I'm coming with a digital disruption topic, which when the PMI fair moved on. Luckily, I will also touch upon sustainability at the end. So I hope in 2 years we'll be on the same page. You said a few things about me. I just would add maybe mainly to help you understand what kind of biases I'll be having when I'm going to talk what I'm going to talk about. So my main fields are organizations where my work is on basically diagnosis, design, strategy, and structures. And the other area is knowledge management, both on human and on the technical part. And specifically on technical part, the technologies around knowledge graphs, which is the topic of today, and with the various activities, coaching, training, projects, of course, that I do a lot. And yeah, the book that Saskia mentioned. Now, I'd like to start with 3 assertions, which probably would be also the main assumptions. If they're not true, then maybe that solution would not be the solution for the problem that I'm talking about. So first one is that information in general, the way it's managed, it is trapped in silos, and that is for personal use in enterprises and even on the web. The other assertion is that every project is unique and every project manager is unique. And the way information is managed does not reflect that well enough. The third is that our needs change quickly. Now, before going on, of course, the answer to that would be use knowledge graphs. But before going to that, can we just have a feeling of what is your experience with knowledge graphs? Can we have a poll on that? Just to know which things to put more emphasis on and which I can safely skip. Okay.
Do you see the results, Ivo?
Yes, I do.
Okay, good.
All right, so far 74%, and we have 65% that have never heard of this, and 35% that they have limited understanding, and none with extensive experience. That would help me a lot to tune my message. So what is knowledge graph? Basically, that's the simplest and most universal way to represent information and knowledge. It is simple because it just has 2 things. It has nodes and edges. So if we have here a node that is labeled solid, we don't know what it is by itself. But then if we go around to other nodes through these edges, which brings semantics, they're not just arrows, we see that solid is a project. It has start date 10th of August. It is initiated by Tim Berners-Lee, the same Sir Tim Berners-Lee who invented the World Wide Web. And here we see his birthday, his birthplace, and then we see that London is a city. We know that, but machines don't. So when we query, it's important to. But anything we represent is just with nodes and edges that are interlinked. And then there is another project here, completely different, Green Homes project, which is in Nepal. And now we learned that Nepal was created in 1768. And then through this path, Nepal is a country, but also United Kingdom, we can reach to another node like London and so forth and so on. That's basically a small portion of a knowledge graph, and we can find out different things just by the way they're related, like Green Homes project has objective sustainable development, which is the field of work of Mulal Wowell, who is a person, also an engineer like Tim Berners-Lee, and by the way, in the same MIT as has the same place to where he gives lectures. So basically, in a nutshell, that is a knowledge graph. And it so happened that in the last year, a graph is in the air. It's in 2019, Gartner said that knowledge graphs is one of the 10 top technologies, and they expected a growth of 100%, but it grew much longer, maybe because of the pandemic. And knowledge graphs have been around for 10 or 20 years, but it's really the last years that they started to be adopted by big enterprises for various tasks, from artificial intelligence, integrating knowledge from heterogeneous sources, personal productivity, and many others. And overall, we can say that we have several types of knowledge graphs. We have open knowledge graphs that are available on the web with open access. We have enterprise knowledge graphs, and we have personal knowledge graphs. And I see the emergence of project knowledge graphs somewhere in between the personal knowledge graphs and the enterprise knowledge graphs. But first, let's see what are the open knowledge graphs. These are initiatives like Wikidata, like DBpedia. For example, Wikidata and DBpedia, they're general knowledge open graphs, where Wikidata, it holds currently 12 billion statements and grows very fast. Then we have knowledge graph, open knowledge graphs for scientific publications like these two for domain knowledge. UniProt is Bank for Proteins knowledge base with 81 billion facts that it presents as knowledge graph that you can query and find a lot of interesting things about. So when you get information from there, you can get from any node to any other in the form that you would like. Here is just, you see a graph of everything linked to the concept of power, and you can find certain things around it for each node. But of course, for humans, it's much better to see that in a way that it is as a web page, but here we can find different labels, different statements. And here, this is a node of the graph showing whatever it's linked to other values and nodes. And you can just click on another and jump to a different place, like this. And or you can get things like the timeline of the prime ministers of Luxembourg. But it's even more interesting that knowledge graphs, they're easy to integrate. They just snap together. So you can take information from several independent knowledge graphs to answer a question that combines this knowledge together. And that's pretty powerful. For enterprises, it's a bit of a different problem. Again, corporate data is trapped in expensive silos. Why? Because corporate applications are traditionally done in the way that each database is rigidly designed for particular applications. The data model is inside the implementation layer, and it's the interpretation of it is dependent on the application code. So it's very difficult to get data together that you can consume independently of a particular application. And this leads to a very high cost of maintenance, a growing technical debt, high cost of integration, and a high cost of innovation. You can read a lot about these problems in this book, Software Wasteland, by the way. So the way to address this, there are different ways, like data lakes, APIs, and data warehouses. But it seems that enterprise knowledge graphs, they have an approach that is quite convincing because it is sort of future-proof. You can easily extend it with new data, and you can respond to changed user needs or changed regulation without a big investment. So it's quite flexible in that way. So integrate data from different data sources in a way that it is experienced by different applications as one big database. In the situation with personal information, it's in fact very similar. It's again trapped in silos. So we have bookmarks, annotations that we have in one place, and then we have documents. We have you do something in a Word document, but from there we cannot search in a presentation or spreadsheet that is in another place, and so on. Not to mention, for example, you cannot share one bullet of your presentation with neither of the current tools, unless they're based on knowledge graphs. The same situation is with highlights. A lot of knowledge that we capture is not linked and not ready to reuse or to be easily retrieved. Information is trapped in emails, calendars, to-do lists, in project management tools, and so on. And for that, personal knowledge graphs, they come handy. Interestingly, the whole ecosystem of tools of thoughts, there was an eruption of these tools of thoughts in the last 2 years, the so-called tools for networked note-taking that embrace the approach of knowledge graphs for that. And indeed, they grew very fast. If just previously there were a few tools before 2018, now there are plenty, and that's not a full list. Last time I checked, there were over 60. Many of them use, in one or another way, something which is close or pretty much a knowledge graph behind the way of managing data. I started using personal knowledge graphs, although I've been working with knowledge graphs for over 10 years. I started using personal knowledge graph only 18 months ago, and I'm using it for my daily tasks, for events, for research, for knowledge synthesis, for writing, for projects, and so on. So I was able to stop using many applications where my information was trapped, and I had a tremendous boost in productivity. Basically, what I'm doing now is also I'm presenting from my personal knowledge graph, where you see what you see presented as slides are in fact facets of the graph, and each slide is a node in the graph linked with other things in different contexts. Each bullet or each image is also a node, and in fact, even parts of the image can appear in different contexts related to other things with specific relations. And you can check out more on the personal knowledge graphs in this video, but now let's talk about project knowledge graphs. So how do we manage project information? Well, we usually use the tool for a certain knowledge area. And there are tools that work well, there are tools that don't work so well. quite often we serve the tool instead of serving us. So why does it happen? Normally it happens because it's designed in a certain way. Yes, it's customizable, but it asks you to do certain things so that it can bring you back some value. So it asks you to enter particular workflow, to go to a particular menu, to enter particular metadata, and so on. And that's just quite often heavy maintenance and overhead, and the actual value is limited, not to mention the way that you cannot really reuse this data in other contexts easily. Or we may have a full-fledged suite, but in reality, it can't cover our information needs, and we use other things. We use Word, we use PowerPoint, we use Excel, we use many other tools around that we disperse different parts of project-related information there. At the end, our project information is fragmented. It's again trapped in silos. This is at least what I have seen so far. And because projects are unique, people are unique, and our needs change quickly, I think the current tools, they can't cope with that, no matter how customizable they are. And here comes the idea of project knowledge graphs, where all information is linked about projects, portfolios of operations. It can quickly adapt to changes because workflows are not something behind part of the design of the tool. It's part of the content. So you design your workflows the way you design the content. And data model can be changed to fit your changing needs without actually doing anything special, like without having the technical knowledge to that would require a normal tool to change the database design. And you can focus on the work. So, and the rest comes along. You can just pull things in your workflow. You don't need dedicated logs. They just would appear as you go. Everything dynamically created and evoked in the context and workflow. And you can enter from anywhere and follow the way you want. It's not for this particular screen or this particular menu that you need to do. Then there are plenty of technologies that can turn text into notes easily, so they can filter, reuse, recombine, and query. It could become one place for doing, managing, and documenting work. So any entity you want to manage, it could be project programs, tasks, issues, plans, logs, reports, anything you can think of that could be completely different and particular for certain project and not normal for any other projects that you are doing. The additional benefit here is that you have a sort of managed serendipity. You create an environment that it can surprise you. It lives a life of its own, that you could find things that are unexpected, looking for something else, or you can discover new relations or just bring new insights, seeing certain things in unexpected contexts. If you have one project entity, and that project entity could be virtually anything you want to manage, or you have some kind of relation with and have information about or needs in your project's knowledge management. That could be a person, organization, program, issue, risk, decision, action, task, rule, deliverable, feature, tool, milestone, and so on. This project entity, it could appear in different contexts, like in a presentation, in a risk log or issue log, in meeting minutes, in a plan, in a report, and in many other contexts, linked with other entities that appear to be in that context for some reason. And that gives incredible flexibility and really a different way of experiencing your knowledge, and the way it boosts productivity is quite impressive. The workflows themselves, they could happen just by classification. Like if you just write something which appears as a block, as a paragraph, then it could go and be associated with a node by being simply tagged as an issue, and then it could become easily an action, could be closed, and it can have this life cycle without bothering you, just appearing the way your work is going. You should be able to pull things in your workflow. Just you focus on your work and you pull things around. You do not go to different areas where they have their own built-in workflow by the applications, and you have to adapt your life to it. You have to adapt, you have to learn how they exactly work so that they can bring the features that you want from them. Which is sort of a different way of working, but extremely liberating and quite with a huge potential, I believe. Which I'm going to make a short demo of to give you. I cannot really demonstrate many of this. Of the possible uses and possible features for the short time that we have. So I want to choose only one area, and it will be the one that will show exactly this, that you can simply pull things in your workflow. Of course, it's difficult to show how the graph behind is working. So what you see has to be through a particular tool that I happen to be using, but my intention is absolutely not to point this to as something that I would recommend or whatever. There are many other I just happen to be using. And overall, the message is that exactly knowledge graphs is what can bring decoupling of information from the applications, which could have huge benefits. So one of the things that takes a lot of time, and many things happen, especially in the last few years, are in fact meetings. We are in a big part of our day in some kind of calls. So I decided to focus on that just as an illustration of something that you can do huge amount of knowledge management work as you go, because they happen anyway. So I'll switch off this, and as you see here, these are just a hierarchy of nodes that I presented, and so on. So this is actually the meeting, which has certain links, which is not a node, but here it's just presented as a simple hierarchy. Now let's imagine that we have a project and we have a project meeting, which I'll just bring with a template. So I'm using this emoji just to be easy, but it could be anything else, because when it appears here, I need to classify it, and it's part of a certain model that I'm creating here, so that other events appear in certain relations with that. So we have a meeting with several participants, like Humpy Dumpy and Henny Penny. Then this is a meeting for the fairy tale project. What is a fairy tale project? Now, that's not something that we should be talk light about, because fairy tale, it comes from FAIR principles for data management. And that is about data to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That's a movement that is using heavily knowledge graphs, because they can bring all these things at a very low cost. And well, this is a project which would bring certain things that would be knowledge graph based to following these principles. And we have different elements of it just put on the right. So I'm going to close this, not to disturb us, but just to show you what is the project about. So we have these participants. today Rapunzel didn't make it, so she's excused. Now, what I'm doing is just what you would see in other tools. You can bring a bullet below another. But here it's not only that. These are not simply bullets. These are nodes in the graph. So when I just moved one below, I changed the relationships from being a participant to being excused in that meeting. And all this is just modification of the graph in that part. And later on, you can easily query or find different reports on different criteria just by doing what you would normally do without any special things to learn. And so it so happened that Humpy Dumpy reported that, let's say, data load takes 1 hour. And then we all agree, well, data load takes 1 hour. This is an issue, and we just tag it as an issue. And then let's review this issue in a week. To review in a week, which is a way to create a new node, because this week is turned into the date. So if we click on the date, we go to that new date. And there you see that previous node, which had that meeting, which had that to review, because of this link appears below in this context. And on that day, we have another meeting. And this day and time, any penny couldn't make it. And because we can see now that today we have to review, we decide on the agenda to make a review of all the issues. And the next point is to decide on validation technology. All right, so we have the issues, and here we can just pull the log, which would get the nodes from different places and will create it on the fly now, but as a view on that data from the perspective of that meeting. So open issues. And we get various open issues from different places that appeared. And we see data log takes 1 hour, that issue which appeared. Just to help you see what's going on, I will also bring closed issues here. So for closed issues, we have 1. And somebody reported that this is solved. So of course, to be solved, it was assigned for this. And I'm just going to make it a task. So now is a task, which is also an issue. That's why it appears in this log, but it will appear also in the backlog and being assigned to somebody that will be associated with that person. And now you see we have it here in the open issues. And if I say that this is done, yeah, that is actually the effect of the presentation. So I'll just type it as closed. So when I type it as closed, you see it disappeared from here. And it appeared in the closed issues log. So the reason it did not appear automatically when I said done is because it did not activate something that would turn the tag from issued to closed when I make it. But you get the principle. So this is how this would work. And in fact, the log itself is something that I can directly interact with and change by changing the state of this item. So, and now about the validation technology. Let's open the project. Here we have some components. I would just go and get this front end. And let's say we have a decision that we have made to change the validation technology from shackle to SHEX, which is just two technical standards for doing data validation. And I put this part here, which I'm going to embed. So now, to understand how this independence of the content from the way it is addressed is happening, I'll open also the solution architecture. And so you see here, this shackle UI appears here in the components, appears here in the diagram that is for the solution architecture, appears as to do, develop shackle UI. And here I brought it in this meeting. And now I'm going to change it to what we have decided, SHEX. And as you see, it is changed here in the diagram, here in the components, and also in to do. That might not necessarily be the right thing to do without any control now. I just wanted to make a point how this kind of approach would work. All right, so now I'm going back to today, where I have things to finish with and have more time for questions. One thing that is important as a principles for project knowledge graphs is basically the same for what is for the enterprise knowledge graphs, that data should be self-describing and should not rely on applications for interpretation and meaning. That would be helped if it is in open and non-proprietary formats, and application should be just a view over data the way I tried to show you. So what are my findings? I find a tremendous boost in productivity and creativity, and that would sound as exaggeration, but that's all I can say. I'm able to handle twice as many projects as before. Then, in terms of principles, already I have said, but there are challenges. This is immature field. Collaborative knowledge graph tools are still very mature. They're in beta, they make the first steps, so it is a risky path to take. The corporate knowledge graph tools, some of them are very mature, but they're not supporting flexible content creation. And that's also makes a difficult candidate, but it could be one way to approach this problem. And now, what about sustainability? making sustainable decisions needs facts. And in fact, the World Wide Web was designed as the hypermedia decentralized system. But certain dark forces that started centralizing it using our data. Luckily, some of them can go down, like it happened yesterday. And just as we started to appreciate the clean air during the lockdown, when we saw what happens when people do not move much, maybe we can appreciate the brainwashing of these big giants that do to us. But if the downtime is not a few hours, but much longer. And just yesterday, I saw this from Rupert Goodwin's, in fact, making exactly an analogy with the climate change, the way our personal data is treated and how this is polluting the environment through these big engines. So the decoupling of applications and data to knowledge graphs, along with the productivity benefits, it can have a huge social impact. And the example I started with, which was the Project Solid, is trying to do exactly that. That was all I prepared to so far, and I hope we can have a good discussions now. In any case, I also hope that I'm going to see some of you this Friday in Luxembourg, face to face.
Yes, you definitely will see some of us. Thank you so much for the content today. So one of the questions that we saw at the beginning was, the first reaction when people saw what you were drawing was, is this a mind map or is this a version of mind map? So I think we learned during the presentation that it's a lot more than that, but how would you comment that remark?
Mind mapping tool is definitely a useful tool, which is based on a concept of hierarchy. And usually the hierarchy that you do not grow from top to bottom, but from center, and you add around, which has this good benefit that you can add in different places, and as things go, and make new relations. And yes, you can use knowledge graphs also for that, but that is a particular application, so you cannot use mind maps to make reports, progress reports, or to query and understand what is the speed of the team, or combine information from different sources.
I think that's...
Yeah, all this is completely different. But yeah, I understand that there is a semblance, because indeed you have there also nodes linked with relations. That is the case, and I've been using mind maps a lot as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. We also saw an extra question from Jan van Echter, called, when collaborating, shouldn't we then not need common vocabulary? What do you think about that, Ivo?
I'm not sure I understood it. Could you please repeat it?
So the question, I think it was, at the latest of your slides. So when collaborating, shouldn't we then not need common vocabulary? Maybe if it's not clear, Jan,
indeed, we need a common vocabulary, But the nice things of knowledge graph that we can do with many vocabularies, because aligning is happening very easily. That's why you can have different vocabularies that are issued by different authorities with their view on the world, and aligning it does not require additional effort. It's just a matter of seeing which things which are the same, which are different, and in what way they're different, and putting the right kind of relations between them. And that's about all. And these relations, they come again from other vocabularies. It is true that in this area of knowledge graph, especially in the semantic knowledge graphs, these vocabularies are called ontologies, and they are often quite well thought through, so that they invite a lot of reuse, which makes it possible that people in different contexts could use the same vocabulary to give the same kind of meaning in different kind of data, and that's extremely useful. All these open knowledge graphs, for example, which I showed, they use this shared vocabularies, and whenever they don't, they have alignments.
Okay, thanks.
Does this answer your question?
Indeed, Jan. Does this answer your question, or?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay, great.
In that sense, I can, for example, show you sort of the vocabulary that I have, but here it could be something different for. So it is.
I was thinking about if you are in your example showing, oh, this is now an issue. The fact that you are calling this an issue, somebody else also needs to call this an issue. You need to have the common understanding of this word issue. Yeah. When afterwards you close this, it should also be a common understanding of what you mean by closing.
Yeah, absolutely. But the way you can build conventions is quite easy whenever, because you don't have this long loop, making an analysis, having a decision, then somebody implementing that, and then using it back in the tools. Here, it's much shorter. If we change our understanding, this change is again part of the content, and we will document it and make the change at the same time.
Yep.
So here is a glimpse of my vocabulary. That it is not something which I would normally do. Normally, I would analyze with competency question the situation, and will try to reuse already something which was developed. But because this emerged from my personal knowledge graph, and this is not the way, for example, in collaborative knowledge graphs, the vocabularies are made, but this is what I can show you now. It just based on self-observation, I discovered things which mattered to me to bring more sense to my information practices. So here, let me see, this will be, no, here I think it will be seen better. So basically, in terms of relations, there are things like reported by, triggered by, supported by, planned for. So these are different relations that I found useful in my work. So they could be different for some, and in some cases, we would have conventions.
Okay.
And I wanted to show you the classes, yeah, these are just numbers I need for certain things. They do not, they're not important. But you see, they also, these classes represent also states, like mailed, reported, asked, but also things like slide deck, podcast, tutorial, to-do guide, and so on. They just appeared through my use.
Okay, thanks. Maybe a next question is from Saskia. You showed an example how you created to-do. What control or change management recommendations can you share to ensure there is ownership and acceptance of the to-do?
That's I think is what I started with. The understanding that you think is good can be applied. You can put a lot of controls. You can put a lot of conventions that needs to be followed. So it is not a method that I'm suggesting, apart from the fact that once you would use knowledge graphs, you just focus on your workflow and you pull things around and you reuse as much as possible. You use different kinds of manipulating that data to whatever you need to do. How you're going to control that, you can control it as much as you want. That would be supported in a way that you would like to do. Of course, it would depend on what kind of applications would we use the data in your graph. They might not have the right features, then you have to find them from somewhere. But that's not a property of your information.
Okay, thanks. Maybe another question. What is a good way to start with this?
That is a very good question. And maybe if I was asked a year ago or 2 years ago, rather, I would say a few years back, in fact, in 2015, I made a POC of enterprise knowledge graph, which was integrating data from enterprise architecture repository, IT governance database, from the internet and from different project documents. And the idea was to use that knowledge graph and from on top to put applications that have the features to make it a project management application that would use a knowledge graph that would not only have project information, but also many other things, including, by the way, data coming from, in that case, it was the human resource database to bring all people in. And I'm talking about several thousands of. So that as a POC was successful, but the organization wasn't mature enough to move on. And at the same time, the strong marketing forces of the different vendors bringing their solutions, they sort of dictate the choices what could be used for that. So maybe that's not the right way to start unless there is already initiative to use enterprise knowledge graphs for data integration in your organization. And then you can just join this movement and bring your project requirements to come along. Now, I believe that it's easy to start with personal knowledge graph. First, to manage personal information and personal projects, and then to move there a few of them that already have good collaborative features and try to use them for managing projects with knowledge graphs until things are mature enough to actually have this decoupling I mentioned, where you can bring different applications with the features that you want to use the data that you have in the graph or in several linked graphs, and these things are independent. Currently, for personal knowledge graphs, they are still quite dependent, but technologies, they develop quite fast.
Okay, great. Saskia, do you have some space for one more question, or?
Sure.
Yeah. New question in chat. Using KG is easier for people from technical background. How do you ensure stakeholder buy-in who have never worked with the knowledge graphs?
Yeah. In corporate setting, they shouldn't know, because they would use the applications that they made with a good user experience for the need that they have, and they would experience only by easily finding things and by easily being able to combine data from different sources. That would be, because then when they search, you don't have a search engine that will bring results. It would have information engine, it will bring answers. It's a completely different experience. So it will be experienced in this way as benefits, but in terms of interaction, nothing will change in terms of the front end. The front end, many of them would not know, would not make the difference. In case we're talking about the personal knowledge graphs, some of them may be used without any technical knowledge, but if you want to do more things, then certain, not the programming, but certain understanding of a few things that are made so that you're very, very flexible with them, but you would need, like you saw, I had a few queries. They're very simply to be done in that template. So, but still, there could be people that these simple things are a bit overwhelming. And in some cases, it's also a matter of simple things like even formatting, because in many of those tools, when they use knowledge graphs, currently, I'm talking about the personal knowledge graphs specifically, they would probably not have a formatting capability, and you have to know, for example, Markdown, which is becoming a standard way to express formatting. But in most cases, that should not be needed. This would be just for those that are more curious to step into this.
Okay, Shitanshu, first of all, I hope I pronounced your name correct. Is that an answer to your question, or? You're on mute.
Yes, to some extent it does. So I guess I would like to dive deeper into that.
Okay, great.
Maybe
Yeah,
I will connect. Yes, please go ahead, Saskia.
Thank you. Yeah, we're pretty much coming to the end of the session. There's one last question which we can maybe answer by coming back or providing some reference material. Diane is asking if there's any reference material, be it publications, websites, or other resources that could be recommended to become more acquainted with this. And Thierry is asking whether it can interact with other products. Now, we're really running out of time here, so I'm going to leave those questions with Ivo, and if he wants to share some answers with us by email or by some other means of communication, we can post the answers on the website afterwards.
All right, they have good answers, so that's what I can say.
Okay, great. It has been great having you, Ivo. I have learned a lot. I did not know about the knowledge graphs, and I'm certainly taking away a lot. So thank you very much for your kind contribution, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in person on Friday. I can't wait.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ivo.